Hi, welcome to this month's episode of Ageless Adventures Travel. I'm so glad that you took the time today to watch my show. My guest is Michelle from Intentional Travelers. Michelle and her husband Jed have been digital nomads traveling the world for the last 16 years, but over the past few years, they have created a pool of resources, training guides, and all types of tips and tricks for travelers. So I'm really glad that we can share some information with you during the show. And also at the end, we will have a free resource for you that she was kind enough to provide for my guests. So stay tuned, and Michelle and I will be right up. Well, hello everyone, and welcome back to Ageless Adventures. I'm always so happy to be able to do this show, to bring you interesting information about my travels, the travels of others, and helpful information for your own travels. And today I have a great guest with me. I have Michelle. She is from Intentional Travelers, and she has traveled to more than 30 countries with her husband, Jed. And they are digital nomads, which means that they do have a base of operations, but they are usually traveling the world and sharing their travels and also sharing all their travel tips with people who follow them. So, Michelle, thank you so much for joining me today, and I'm really glad to have you here.
Thank you for having me. I'm excited to be here.
Yeah, it's great because Michelle and I have actually have some history because I did a 1 minute video for one of their summits. They're called DIY summits, and we had one the year before last, and this year we had one in January that was 3 days of virtual information, incredible information, all still accessible if you sign up. And that's how we met. And this year I was a virtual guest on one of these segments. So we do go back, and that's why I thought Michelle would be such a great addition to my show today. And I think we're going to start talking first, well, a little bit about you all, but you have step-by-step tutorials, planning tools, all different types of skills and things that you share about your own travels that you found to make things easier.
Yes, like you said, trip planning is actually one of my favorite things to do. So I love the research part of it and kind of sharing what we've learned along the way. We have been kind of part-time nomads, like you mentioned. We're based in Oregon, usually about half the year. And then we have gone to 5 different continents since 2014. We were in Peace Corps together, kind of as a sabbatical, and then just never went back to our regular jobs. But that's a different story. And because we live abroad roughly half the year and have traveled so much, we have really honed some different strategies and found tools that help make it possible for us to travel a lot more affordably, more effectively than we imagined before. So part of what I do now is teach travelers what I've learned. And as Debbie mentioned, we like to host virtual events like the DIY Trip Summit to kind of bring together our fellow travel creators and share expertise. Last time it was around Europe. We'll kind of do some different themes going forward. So yeah, I'm excited to be here and kind of talk
Go into that.
about tech and travel tips and wherever you want to go.
Right. Well, obviously we mentioned earlier about smartphones when we were talking offline. That's one of the harder things that it is that I find when I teach. Is the use of smartphone and the apps and eSIM. So if you can just share a little bit about, like, you have tutorials on smartphone use as well, but if you have maybe like the top couple of tricks that you recommend to travelers, particularly my audience tends to be older. And I've done my best on my tech show to help them learn tech, but there's still, I even find myself sometimes challenged by, an eSIM that doesn't work. And, somebody's probably sitting at home watching right now going, what's she talking about? But, what do you feel like when what do you open with when we're talking about smartphones to travelers?
Yeah, none of us grew up with smartphones, me included. I became an adult before smartphones were invented. So, in a way, I'm with you. I hear from a lot of people, most of us do use our smartphones every day at home, some folks more than others. And I know the technology just changes so fast. It's hard to keep up. And there's a little bit of a tendency to want to ignore it. So I think it's important to know, like, what are the essentials so that you don't have to get overwhelmed with all the different apps and all the things that you need to keep up with. So my goal is to keep myself up to date, but be able to translate for people in a simple way, what are really the essential things to know, to be able to do, and help people be aware that even though you do use it at home quite a bit, there are additional things that you need to be aware of when you go abroad, especially some things to keep in mind. And these days, it's really hard to travel without some smartphone savvy. So I just want to make sure that everyone's prepared because, at the airport, some airlines don't even let you print tickets anymore. You have to have it on your phone.
Right.
So things like that, tickets and stuff that are coming through your phone. So it's not about knowing all the things, but just getting yourself more comfortable and familiar before you go abroad. So it's not a big source of stress. And you feel, competent and more prepared. And really, it can be such a powerful tool to have that computer in your hand, in your pocket, in your hand,
Right.
um, to be able to overcome anything that pops up. Because we all know when we travel internationally, there's things that you don't know what you don't know until you get there, right?
Right. So what do you, I mean, like, I know what my top like 4 or 5 apps are. What are your top ones that you would recommend to somebody who doesn't want to be overwhelmed? I mean, I know what I would say, so I'd like to hear if you have, because you might say something I don't even know about. So what were your top like 4?
Well, I bet they're similar, but yeah, I'm curious how we compare. So I do teach this in one of my courses. It's just 4 apps, the ones that I think are the most helpful, and then some best practices that go along with them. But Google Maps is my first one. And not just for getting directions, but actually using that for trip planning and just making sure that you always know where you are and finding cool places to go. So that's a really big one. I have a whole course on that. But Google Translate, I think if you're traveling internationally, having some way to know what's going on around you really helps you for safety wise, to have deeper connections. So being familiar with all the different ways to use Google Translate, not just in text, but using the camera option, using the audio back and forth conversation option are really powerful. And then WhatsApp, if you're not already using at home, it tends to be very widely used pretty much everywhere that we have gone, even small businesses, your tour guides, your accommodation hosts, a lot of them are using WhatsApp. So that's something that you want to be familiar with.
Mhm.
And it doesn't, you don't have to be roaming. You can use it on Wi-Fi. You can use it on your eSIM or your international SIM card, which I'm sure we can talk about as well. And then the other one that, I don't use at home is ride hailing apps. I live in a small town, so it's not applicable. But when we are abroad, I really prefer that to taxis because of all the different ways that even if it's not like a full on taxi scam, there are some safety concerns. There's, you know, being able to pay with your credit card instead of figuring out
Oh, yes.
change or getting, a lot of scams are around like having the wrong kind of change. So, and then just knowing where you're going because you have the app, you've set your start and your end point. So those ride hailing apps vary based on destination, but the best practices are the same. So that's kind of what I teach is like how to set it up and how to use it. So those are my four: Google Maps, Google Translate, WhatsApp, and Rideshare. I
And
use
ride
a
shares like
currency app
Uber.
too.
Oh,
Right.
currency app. But if you have an iPhone, it's a button
In the
in the iPhone.
calculator.
So cool, and the calculator.
Yeah.
Yeah, it was just because I'm going to South Africa and some other places, and we had to do conversion. But I want to talk about ride apps for a minute. Actually,
Okay.
you and I were in the same place at the same time, but didn't couldn't connect. And Budapest was
Yes.
that's my cat, by the way. He loves to jump through the Zoom. And yeah, so I was in Budapest and found out that there are like they all charge the same thing, whether it's a taxi, Uber, Bolt, Lyft, but they have if they tell you to look for the logo and the thing because there were a lot of scams. But still, when you get in, if you do go in a taxi, you want to make sure that they're going to be able to accept your credit card or not, because a lot of them will say, oh, yes, and then get to the destination and try to tell you, oh, no, I have to have cash. I had that happen. And of course, I argued and didn't give the person, but the ride sharing apps are protective. The other thing I discovered while I was in Germany is you can go to Uber and request an Uber and it'll tell you it's looking for your Uber. Come to find out they don't even have Uber. So that was an interesting dynamic. I went to my hotel front desk and I said, I've been trying to get an Uber. And they said, oh, no, we don't have Uber. And I said, I found that disconcerting that Uber would say that they were finding me a ride when they truly had nobody that could come from the big city. And I was not in a real small city, but yeah, the guy at the desk are like, yeah, we don't have that here, around here. So that's important for people to know. But going back to what you said about Google Maps, Google Maps is a wonderful tool, as you mentioned. I make lists and I add the places into my list. And
Yep.
so if you're doing a tutorial and people are listening to us right now, if Michelle's doing the tutorial on how to best set up your Google Maps and use it effectively, absolutely recommend, because that is something I self-taught. And I still don't think I probably use it to its full functionality.
I know there's so many features that people don't realize are there, and Google Maps is the one that kind of started me teaching actually because we were in Hoi An where we spend a lot of our time in Vietnam. We go back pretty often, and one of our online friends, first time we met her, she was visiting and she was like, what are you doing on your phone? It looks like you have all these points saved. And I'm like, oh yeah, same with you. I figured it out over time. And she's like, I would love to know how to do that. So that was kind of the spark of like, oh yeah, these are things that I'm doing all the time because this is part of my life. But if you haven't traveled as much, you just haven't had the opportunity to look into this. So if you want a shortcut, yeah, I have tutorials on exactly how to set that up. And I love that it helps our trips be more flexible because we have those places saved on the map. Say we're at lunch, and we're like, okay, we have a little extra time, before we have to do our next thing. What's around us? What are the things that I've already saved? And we can
Right.
just, do that instead of having our itinerary spelled out, minute by minute.
One thing though, one cautionary tale is like I'll go in and just add a whole bunch of stuff, and then I'm like, why did I add all these things? But the good news is there is a little section that you can say, put a note. Why did I
Label.
save
Yep.
this? What was it about this place that I wanted to save? It's a great thing to do, if you're sitting on the couch before your trip and you're thinking of ways to prepare for your trip, using that function, the list function and pinning different places is great, but do leave yourself a note about why, because often I'm like, why did I say that one?
Absolutely.
But yeah, I mean, and it's interesting because I'm going to be walking my Camino, another Camino, the second time in a month, and I'm there and I'm looking at the hotels and the places that I'm staying, and I'm pinning them on the map and seeing, and some of them are very rural,
Mm.
um, and one place I'm staying has just 5 rooms. Um, so that should be, and it's there's not, I looked at the map, there's nothing around. Um,
Ah,
Thankfully though, they do feed you, so you don't have to go foraging for food,
oh,
which
cool.
which I guess you probably could, but that's interesting. Another thing I want to talk about the phone though too, and maybe you can add some things like because you go and spend a long period of time in certain places. You slow what they call slow travel,
Mm.
and you really immerse yourself in the cultures and things like that. But I know people are really fearful about losing their phone. Um, do you have anything that you like specifically think about as far as like do you have a tether? What are your protective measures for your phone?
Yeah, Tether is a really good one. We talk a lot about this in our trip security spotlight, which you were a part of. So that's another resource that we have for folks. And phones really are one of the phones and devices and valuables. It's kind of one of the biggest like security issues, more so than, like violent crime in most places you don't really have to
Right.
worry about. But whenever there are a lot of tourists, that's an easy target. So one of the things people don't necessarily think about is looking like you know what you're doing and being very aware because that lowers your risk of being a target right there. So having those smartphone skills are going to help you, feel comfortable in your surroundings, not be kind of like looking like this, like, ooh, that'd be easy to swipe and run away with.
Right. Right.
Um,
The e-bike rider rides right by while you're looking around with your phone and takes it right out of your hand. That's been very common in London, the e-bike riders coming by and taking
Everywhere.
the phones. Yeah,
Yeah.
everywhere.
Yeah, so it really is about mitigating your risk. You can do so much to lower that just by knowing your way around. And when I say that, obviously you're in a new place, you're not going to know everything, but a simple thing like when you are looking up your location or where you're going to go next, pull over to the side, put your back against a wall or somewhere so you're not totally exposed all the way around. If you
Hmm.
have a travel partner, have them come over to the side with you and have them keep their eyes open, just to kind of be an extra person looking out, but also preventing you from looking like it'd be easy to take something from you and no one would notice. So yeah, pull over, look, and then put your phone back in your pocket or, just keep it tight in your hand as you go through the crowds and get to your next destination. So that can go a long way. The other thing
Yeah.
we talked about in the security spotlight are some steps of settings that you can do on your phone before you go so that if it is lost, you're able to remotely they call it brick it. So it becomes a brick. It's not usable by whoever has stolen it. If they can potentially hack it, it cuts off your personal identification information and all that stuff. So those are important steps to take before you go, which we have laid out. But
Yeah.
yeah, those are probably my top ones. Did you have anything else?
No, I was just thinking about the thing. I just, in fact, one of my recent blogs, I talked about backing up against a wall too, so you could still have your peripheral vision while you're trying, so and looking up from your phone often,
Yep.
so that you can kind of gauge because people can come up really fast,
Yeah.
and do that. But, I was in Florence last year and I was with a group of like women my age, and somebody not as, hadn't traveled as much as I have. They were kind of there with their phone, going to take pictures. And I noticed people, young ladies out of the corner of my eye, very
Scoping you
well
out.
dressed, by the way. And I just knew that they didn't seem like they had good intention. So I made sure that I pulled my person with me aside and I'm like, you need to make sure that your phone, but I tether my phone. I've done that the last maybe year of travel. I didn't always do it. And sometimes I like to use a selfie stick, not to take selfies per se, but it helps me stabilize my phone, but it's small. But I've become very aware of using that now in who's around me, because that's an easy way for somebody, because it's not, they just rip it right out of your hand. But I have a travel, and I will plug, I'm not, don't get any money from Travel On, but I like the Travel On bag, the one that has the can't be cut by the wire, has a front pocket, and I'm able to tether my phone. I use a adjustable length tether, so it can go in my pouch in the front, and then I can take it off. And those are my security measures that I take, and I will knock on wood that I haven't had any issues. But one time I was going. I don't think it was my last trip. I'm trying to think where I was going. I have an old iPhone and I never turned it in because I thought I would rather just keep it. I traveled with my extra iPhone as a precaution and
Mm.
had it just in case something happened to my phone.
Yeah, I've had a few members mention that, and we have an older iPhone as well. So I think that's a good point. One more thing I thought of is,
Mhm.
if you're sitting down having lunch or something at a cafe, never put your phone or valuables on the table. And also,
Or the back of the chair.
yeah, people just have really elaborate ways of, they'll put a newspaper over it and or they'll like have one person distract you and the other person pull it away. So, yeah, if you do get your phone stolen, you are not alone by any means. There are very kind of yeah,
It's
elaborate
hard,
ways
isn't?
that people are
Yeah.
doing these things, but
But
all you can do
knowledge
is your best.
And knowledge is power. By knowing these options, that's what we're here to, knowledge is power. The more you know about these tricks, the easier it can be to help hopefully protect yourself. I go to very elaborate measures when I sit down. I, put my leg through my pouch and have it under my legs so I can feel it. And often if I do have my phone tethered, I'll put it like inside, like in front of me or something. I travel often on the off season, so often I do have either a sweater, a coat, a puffy vest, so that I do have that extra thing. My puffy vest has a pouch, like a inside. It's not really a pocket, but it works.
Yeah, yeah.
It works. So yeah, but knowledge is power, and that's really what this episode is about. Being cognizant, take the time to learn these things. And there are people like Michelle who have the classes. I don't do my classes like that anymore. But there are a lot of ways to do this. And Michelle has some free content. She has some content that's fee-based, but well worth it. Any sneak peeks at what the next summit might be about, or we're still talking about it?
Well, I'm pretty sure we're gonna do Asia, first time Asia travel, and specifically East and Southeast Asia. So Japan, Korea, Thailand, those
All right.
places. Yeah,
That's on my radar, so that'll all be a good learning experience for me as
awesome.
well. And I actually have a couple of clients. They want to go to Japan and Korea. So that'll be perfect. They'll be
Yeah.
very anxious in learning about that. I do think that's a very popular thing. And right now there's a lot of apprehension about international travel. And I do my best to alleviate what I can. But Japan and Asia and those countries, Thailand, all those countries are still very popular. They're very safe for a lot of my people who are solo travelers.
Yeah.
And so I think that's great. And you all have spent an extraordinary amount of time there, so I trust whatever you tell us.
Thanks. Yeah, definitely highly recommend exploring Asia if you haven't already. And I feel so safe. I mean, safer than at home for sure, in almost every place that we've been in Southeast Asia, Japan, Korea, for sure. Yeah, so I'm excited about that and just getting a bunch of experts together again to share their insights for next year.
Yeah, and that was great with the last DIY. It was 3 days long. Obviously, there were live sessions, there were recorded sessions. So there was a lot of ways for people to go back. I didn't get to go through much of it until way after the fact because, just time. But it's nice because if you do get the premium one, then you have access to it forever. And you can go back and refresh your memory because that's another thing of what you're talking about, like your phone and the apps and things. If they're not things you use every day, you forget. You forget how to use certain aspects of them or whatever. And one of the things I've taken to doing, and you might have to do this too, I make sure before I leave that everything's updated, that I can log in, that they aren't suddenly asking me for two-factor authentication where they might not have done it before. I did add a tip I think it was on my last episode about face recognition and how to disable that depending on where you're at. If you don't want face. But, so many apps now are using face recognition, particularly if you're using an iPhone.
Yeah.
So that's one thing I really recommend. Do you have any final recommendations before we say goodbye?
Well, sure. Since you bring up making sure that it's all set up before your trip, which I definitely recommend as well. We compiled 12 things that we do before flying internationally. So that's a free resource that we're giving away. It's part of one of our courses, but folks can sign up. But it's just, yeah, international. What are you going to do on your phone before you go so that you're going to be connected and be able to tackle any random issue that comes up. Uh, so having, these 12 things in place will help you land and feel more prepared.
Which is great, which is absolutely great because there's nothing worse than getting off the plane and walking down that long hallway and going, oh my gosh, I forgot to do blank. And it
When
happens,
you're tired and you're stressed, you've just been traveling for 12 hours. Yeah.
or more.
Nope.
All right. Well, Michelle, this has been great. I again will add all of Michelle's information, how you can get that free the 12 steps to take. I'm going to look at that because there's probably a step that I didn't even think about myself. And I can't wait to be a part of your next event. And where are you all off to next?
That's a good question. We do a little domestic travel for conferences that we work at, but our next international is probably Peru, and then we'll be
Oh,
going back to Europe. Yeah.
oh, cool. Peru. All
Yeah.
right. Well, thank you again, Michelle, for your time. I really
My
appreciate
pleasure.
it. I know we'll be in touch on our own, but safe travels to you and to Jed, and I can't wait to read all about it.
All right.
Thank
Happy
you.
travels.
Bye-bye. Well, thanks for watching today. I love doing this show. I love traveling the world. I love sharing it with you and hope that you continue to enjoy these episodes for as long as I make them. So, everybody take care. Stay safe when you travel. If you have any questions, you know how to get a hold of me. And that's it. Thanks for watching.